Fed up with having to lift heavy planters when you need to move them around? Then try these quick and easy, low-cost DIY planter caddies. They're really simple. To make these caddies, all you need are a few lengths of timber, a handful of screws and 4 casters. Whilst they can be put together with just a couple of basic hand tools, if you're going to be making a few, then some common power tools will certainly help speed things up. Okay then, let's get started. For the timber, I used a few lengths of pressure treated roofing battens left over from a previous project, measuring 50 by 25mm. That's 2 by 1 inches in old money. But you could use pretty much any solid timber, from plain, soft or hardwood to salvaged pallet wood. I'd avoid anything like MDF, chipboard or plywood, as they're not going to stand up too well to getting wet. For each caddy you'll need 12 screws to assemble the timber framework. I used 30 or 35mm long Posi-Drive gold screws from Screwfix, but anything similar will do. You may need to choose a different length of screw depending on the thickness of the timber you're using. For the casters, I was originally intending to reuse some salvaged items from a couple of old office chairs. However, when the missus got wind of my plans, the number of caddies required suddenly mushroomed. So I ended up buying a bulk lot of caster wheels on eBay. They're nothing fancy, but are more than up to the job of supporting a decent sized planter full of compost. A handful of screws to secure the casters completes the materials list. I used plasterboard or drywall screws, again because I had them to hand. In terms of tools, all you really need are a pencil, tape measure, saw, drill, screwdriver and some sandpaper. The saw can be anything from a hand saw, jigsaw, or if you're lucky enough to own one, a miter saw. Whilst a hand drill and manual screwdriver are absolutely fine, most people will probably have access to a cordless drill driver these days. So how big are we going to make our caddies? Well, having looked at the various planters around the handyman at home residence, I settled on a footprint of 300 by 250mm. That's roughly 12 by 10 inches, as this seemed a good match. Not too small, not too big, as Goldilocks might never have said. For each caddy then, we need to cut 3 lengths of 300mm and 2 lengths of 250mm. So a 1.5 metre length of timber will be enough to make each caddy, allowing a little loss for each saw cut and trimming any rough ends. You can obviously adjust these dimensions to suit your own needs, and if you're planning to do something a bit fancier than my simple rectangular versions, you'll need to make allowance for any trimming to the final shape, whether that be circular, hexagonal or whatever. To start with, I cut one length of 300mm and one length of 250mm to use as marking off guides, which saves having to measure out each individual piece. In my case, because I was making quite a few caddies, it made sense to get all the cutting done in one session, so I set up a stop block on the miter saw and got chopping. As my timber was rough cut, a little bit of sanding was in order just to take off the rough edges along each length and at the ends. We're not talking fine furniture here, mind you, although if you want yours to look more concours d'elegance and my pickup truck styling, feel free to go to town. Assembly is straightforward. I started out by laying down the centre 300mm length and then fastening the two lengths of 250mm at right angles to it, positioned centrally and set in by about 20mm, as shown. I used 2 screws per joint arranged diagonally to avoid any tendency to rack. Note that all the screws are screwed in from what becomes the underside of the caddy, so that any water, whether from rain or watering the plant, doesn't end up sitting on the screw and finding its way inside the timber. Fitting the final 2 lengths of 300mm is then straightforward. I chose to fit them flush to the ends of the 250mm lengths, but none of this is hypercritical, so feel free to do your own thing. Once we've got the basic timber framework completed, all that remains to do is to screw on the casters. I set them in slightly as I felt this looked aesthetically better. Well, actually, if I'm honest, it was to avoid the screws fouling those holding the timber lengths together. Well, we're not all perfect. And there you have it, they're done, ready for a test drive. Now, you can obviously leave them in their natural state, but I managed to lay my hands on some surplus Ronseal fence life in a lovely shade of teal, which I think finished them off great. When I say lay my hands on, I borrowed it from my daughter. Well, it makes a change from me being the free DIY store. So there you have it, my cheap and cheerful planter caddies. Mine came in at around £5 each, that's about $6 to $7, and they should last a good few years without needing much attention. An occasional fresh coat of stain and perhaps a squirt of oil or WD-40 on the casters every now and again should be all that's needed. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks as always for watching. If you liked this video, please don't forget to click on the thumbs up icon, as that helps me reach a wider audience. Do consider subscribing if you're not already. It doesn't cost you anything, and if you hit the notification bell icon as well, you'll be alerted whenever I release future content. Look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Cheers.